Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battisil, and I want to know, what's your next move? Hi there, I'm Arlene Battisil, your host and resident provocateur, and I have a wonderful friend with me today, Emerald Greenforest, and I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting her at the New Media Summit, which was all about podcasting, but so much more. And we became very fast friends at the event. And I have a sneaking suspicion, and I think Emerald does as well, that we're going to be friends for life. And so I am really delighted to have Emerald on the show. She is considered one of America's premier experts, and she has an international reputation as the author of 7 books and has contributed to another 15, and is an inspirational speaker, having presented nearly 500 times in 8 years on both live and virtual stages. Emerald, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I know you're super busy, so I'm really honored that you're here with me today. So thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome, Arlene. Thank you for having me. And I want to actually correct you. I am not super busy intentionally. I am intentionally not super busy because I have stopped sacrificing my life on the altar of busyness in service to having my life be on the altar of joyful expression and contribution, which sometimes looks busy and sometimes looks very leisurely.
I stand corrected, my friend.
Yeah, that is not to say that my time is not immensely valuable. Let's put it that way.
Yes, very important distinction. All right, Emerald, why don't you walk me through where you're at in your life today and what you're doing?
Sure. Right now, I am serving men. They hire me to help them really align more fully with their purpose and make their mark and create a legendary legacy and really step into the leadership role that requires. To serve that, I'm also hostessing the Men on Purpose podcast, where I elevate, celebrate, and spotlight men on purpose from around the world who I believe are doing really wonderful things in a variety of areas, in a variety of industries, both personal and professional development. And I'm having a ton of fun, both being interviewed myself on podcasts like this one, as well as serving my men who I am spotlighting on my show. And where I am right now in my journey, my personal journey, is I've just relocated out of my home of 12 years and stepped into the next level of my own path beyond motherhood. So up until recently, I was a single mom raising my son in a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath suburban home in New England, and he's now adulting himself, and I am now I emptied the nest, so, including myself. I emptied myself and him out of the nest.
Wow, that's incredible. And of course, in everything that you just said, I have about 10 million questions. So we'll see how many of them we can get through today.
Sure, no worries.
Now, I'm really interested, let's stay in the present for a moment. I'm really interested in what you were saying near the outset about the men that you're working with. And walk me through in more detail the kind of work that you're doing with men and where you're trying to get them.
Sure. So men, as well as women, have been conditioned and culturally and societally and educationally taught to believe that they have to be a certain way and they have to fulfill certain expectations, yada, yada, yada. And what that does is it actually represses, suppresses, and depresses their natural tendencies and their natural gifts and their natural desires to contribute and serve the world in a certain way. And so even though they may look, quote, successful, close quote, on the outside, they may be feeling very challenged, frustrated, or even it could be just slightly off on the inside. Sometimes it's just slightly off, but that slightly off is like a chronic thing that creates a drain or a kind of a ennui with their life, like a boredom with their life, because they're not really fully 100% immersed in and engaged in what their true purpose and their true calling is. They may be doing it on the side, they may be ignoring it, they may be suppressing it. And my work is to help them literally strip away everything that's in the way of them leading and living a legendary life. And so it can take a variety of different courses in order to do that. There's lots and lots of tools in the toolbox, but ultimately the goal is to really support these men to be the men on purpose they were actually born to be, and to express themselves fully and completely with their unique gifts, not just fitting into the man box or the success box that society tells them they're supposed to be in.
And in the way that you're talking about this, Emerald, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. This is not about them moving out of the place that they're in the highly successful careers and lives that they've had. Is it that, meaning moving to another position? This is about them, I guess, in a way, self-actualizing and being able to bring forward things in their life that are going to create greater joy for them that actually have nothing to do with their work. Is that correct?
Well, it depends. Every man is going to be different. Some men are ready to make that move. They are ready to leave what they've been doing and express themselves in a new or different way because they're called in a whole new direction, but they're capable of leveraging the leadership that they've already experienced and the success that they've already experienced, and leveraging the relationships that they've already built in service to this higher calling. Sometimes my men are what I like to call the corner office change agents. They've reached a certain level of success within their organization or within their industry, and they are suddenly awakened and called into serving as change agents right within that industry or right within that organization. Sometimes they're called completely in new directions, but they cannot. They're in a place, when they come to me, they're in a place where it's gnawing at them. This calling is gnawing at them, and they know that they have to do something more, and they're not entirely clear how to disengage from the things that are not working in service to directing their energy and their power and their life force and their devotion in the direction of the dream that's calling to them now, or the vocation that's calling to them now, or the movement that might be calling to them. Sometimes they are retired and they have gone into retirement and they've been in retirement for a couple of years. I'll give you an example. I was on the plane last September, coming back from the first New Media Summit. I was on the plane with a guy who was a retired athlete. He had been a professional basketball player in the international league over in Turkey. And we had this lovely conversation on the plane. In the last 5 minutes, as we were like on the tarmac in Chicago, he was getting off and I was continuing. But I had this conversation with him and I said, well, what are you doing to, how did you manage to maintain your financial success in an industry where a lot of people, they get the financial success, but then it disappears on them quickly. And I said, it would be so beautiful for you to be able to be contributing to young athletes who are now getting signed to help them to be financially stable and to be able to receive the success. And his eyes just lit up, Arlene. And it was like something he had never even thought about. And he's kind of like in this place of, okay, I'm retired, I'm living the good life, I'm taking vacations with my girlfriend, I'm going golfing with my buddies. And he had been kind of floating for 2 years that way. And then all of a sudden, the infinite source seated me next to him. And by the time we got done with our conversation, he looked at me and said, I should have been talking to you the entire time I was on this plane. Oh, here's my card. We can have another conversation a little bit later after you get off the plane. So they can be in a variety of different places. But the key point here, Arlene, is that they're feeling a state of discontent with what they have, what they're present with in the present moment. And they're feeling a desire to make a shift, and they may not have 100% clarity on what that shift is. And I help them to get that clarity, or they may have some clarity, but they don't know how to disentangle themselves, and I help them to disentangle. So yeah, there's a variety of different ways that we work together, and it's really, that's why I facilitate exclusive invitation only, because each man is different. Each man is different. This is not a cookie cutter signature formula kind of thing. Each legacy is different. Your legendary life is unlike anyone else's legendary life.
And let me ask you, how does the discontent that they're experiencing at this point in their lives manifest itself?
Great question. So sometimes it can manifest in the form of depression, and it doesn't have to be severe depression. It can just be a low-lying depression. Sometimes it manifests in the form of divorce or thinking about divorce if they're married. Sometimes it manifests in the form of some other dis-ease. And that could be, a chronic disease, or it could be a sudden, could be a heart problems, could be a variety of different things. But dis-ease, depression, divorce, those are all kind of signals that something is not right. Something is not aligned, something. And it's like there's, I don't know who said it originally, but there's the whisper, and then there's the knock, and then there's the cosmic 2x4. And my desire is to really get them somewhere between the whisper and the knock, and way before they get to the cosmic 2x4.
And is it usually the case that they are coming to you at the point that the cosmic 2x4 has rained down on them?
Well, ideally, no. Ideally, they are feeling that it's coming, and they've already received the whisper, they've already had the knock, and they don't need to have the cosmic 2x4, because the cosmic 2x4 is really, I can certainly help people at that level, but that's not the ideal place, because when the cosmic 2x4 comes, it's like literally smashing in a million pieces every part of your life, rather than coming at it from a place where you're doing what I call creating conscious change.
Got it. And when people are experiencing what they are prior to coming to you and having you helping them, what is it? I'm really curious about this, because if people have these really successful lives and, on the face of it or the surface, everyone looks at them and they say, oh, you have the perfect life, you have the perfect relationship, you've got this great job, you've got all this money, you've got these houses, you've got all these assets and what have you. And what is actually happening for them? Yes, of course it's discontent, but there is something much deeper than just a general malaise or discontent. In your experience, what is actually at the root of that discontent at that point in life?
Yeah, so I would say that their calling is activating at a much deeper level. And that calling must be answered. And it's at the very deepest level, it's the gift that they uniquely came to the world to deliver that has yet been undelivered.
And is this usually something that is associated with helping other people?
generally speaking, it can be something that's helping other people, but it doesn't have to be. It can be making a contribution to the planet. It can be making a contribution to the animal kingdom. It could be making a contribution to the plant kingdom. It could be making a contribution in any variety of ways. But what it is it's this deep calling that has gone unanswered or has been set aside for however many years, because they were serving this vision of success that has left them feeling not complete. They, no matter how many toys they have, how many vacations they take, how many numbers are at the end of their bank statement, there's this underlying feeling of, I have not fully delivered what I came here to deliver.
Right. I just think it's really fascinating to consider that, you know, we come into life with a calling. It's there. And it seems that we start with it, and then we spend an entire lifetime moving away from that calling. And then we get to a point where now we have come full circle to that. And what I'm curious about is why people are not following their calling in the beginning. Is it all related to the traditional forms of success or the way that our success is measured in life?
Well, if you think about it, Arlene, we all come in as, I think it was Sarah McLachlan, the singer Sarah McLachlan, sang a song, Born Innocent, right? We are born innocent, right? So we all come in with this innocence. If you look at a newborn baby, you can see that really the only purpose they have is to be magnificent, right? They're just this radiant, magnificent being. And what happens is we come in, and it's kind of like the Pillsbury Doughboy, you know, when they stick their finger in the Pillsbury Doughboy and it makes an indentation. So what happens is our parents start to make indentations. Our siblings start to make indentations. Our experiences in school, when we first start to go into the education system, it starts to make indentations. And we start to compensate to attempt to have ease where there is conflict with our natural radiance and our natural gifts. And so as a result, we acquire and accumulate layer after layer after layer after layer after layer of accommodations, of masks, of expectations that belonged to others that we took on. And that has been a way that things have been for a very long time. We now, though, are in a time where the level of consciousness and self-awareness and the potential and availability for self-actualization is better than it has ever been in our history as beings on this planet. And so we actually now have the spaciousness, and in the case of the men that I'm working with, they have also got the financial resources. They've got the connections. So I'm not saying that the journey to get to the place where you're finally answering your calling is good or bad, because it is a journey that also allows you to start to put all kinds of experiences and tools in your toolbox that ideally in the end are going to serve that purpose as well. So the work is about stripping away all of that conditioning to get back to the core essential, you know, the bad boy that you know, wants to play and who has a lot, you know, we want to have your inner bad boy come out in the best ways possible, if that makes sense. Right. To come back to that innocent, creative, childlike, natural blessing that you are, and to employ all that you have accumulated in service to creating this legacy that will ideally live far beyond your extinction.
Mm, the real contribution, for sure.
Exactly.
It's so beautiful. And what struck me when you were describing all of this was the the issues of clarity and confidence. And it seems like the people that you work with, the men that you work with, they are not lacking confidence in anything in their life. What they're lacking is clarity around what they should be doing next, that real sense of purpose. And does it really just come down to that when you're working with people, it is helping them to become more clear and concise about what it is, what their next move is?
My favorite thing to say, Arlene, is clarity is divinity. And
Wow.
so,
I think that's going to
yeah,
be the
that's
name of this episode.
clarity is divinity. And what I am going to say to you is, yes, they are extraordinarily confident, except in the area of following their calling.
Very interesting.
So if they had 100% confidence that they were in fact actually being called in this direction, right? And they had clarity that, yes, that is indeed the direction that they are being called in. And yes, that is indeed the contribution that they are here to make. Then they are these kind of guys, they're high achieving guys. They're going to be on it right away.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge that I often work with them on is first getting the clarity and then leveraging the confidence they already have in so many other areas and applying that confidence in this new and somewhat unknown, but actually intimately familiar direction because they've been carrying it their whole life.
Right, for sure. And do you think that they throughout life have actually been aware of this? Is it the case that they are sort of living with this slight nagging feeling throughout their life, or is it that they're just driving all the way to the top of their success ladder, and it's at that point they start feeling this? Because there's a certain momentum and adrenaline that comes with, driving yourself up that ladder, and then you get there and now it's okay, now what do I do? Are the men that you're working with, or even the women that you're working with, do they talk about that this is something that's been with them the whole time, that they have been conscious of and just never did anything about it? Or it really does reveal itself once they've reached the level of success that they were striving for?
So I'm going to say yes and yes.
Okay.
So in some cases, there are people who've always been called. So for example, I'll give you an example. I worked with an actor last year. I mean, this man was born to act like you can't even believe. He was born to act. He's got the look, he's got the voice, he's got the presence, he's got the craftsmanship. And he was doing this other thing to make money and having the acting kind of be on the side. And so what I call that is the tangential experience. Like you've got your feet in two different worlds. One world is the world where he's somehow convinced himself, well, I'm making money over here, even though my gift is to be an actor. So after we did some work together, we did a VIP session of time together. I helped him to literally strip away and dismantle and dissolve and disintegrate this system of belief that he had set up within himself, and that he was, of course, reinforcing, because yes, he was making money over here, and no, he wasn't making money in acting, because he had this weird tangential experience that he was creating for himself. And when we finished our work, he ended up getting a part on Once Upon a Time, which is a TV show, and he is doing exceptionally well, and he's focused, and he's in his gift. He's doing his gift. And I can tell you, Arlene, I can 100% assure you he will be on the red carpet, because I can see that. I could see that when I first started talking to him. And when you're off even slightly, you're not going to be on the red carpet. You're going to be standing beside it, looking at the people who are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that is just one example. So there can be the tangential where all their life they've kind of had this, oh, my whole life I've always wanted to do X, Y, Z, but I'm doing A, B, C so that I have the money so that eventually I can do X, Y, Z, right? Mm-hmm. So there's those tangential people. Right. And then there are the sudden awakeners. And that was part of my journey. So my own experience was I just did that drive thing right up to the top of my game. My first round, I've done this more than once, Arlene. Mm-hmm. So back in the day, 20 some odd years ago, I was in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. And when I went into the real estate business, I ended up being the national chairperson for my trade association, youngest and for a second or third female to be the national chair of the trade association. At the same time that I was building with two partners, 51 single family homes, 56 apartments in an office building, working 6 12-hour days, just doing the whole crazy thing. Right. Mm-hmm. And I had a spiritual awakening that was so not expected and so out of the blue and so everything I'm doing here is not functioning in reality, even though it looks like it's functioning on the outside. On the inside, I was a mess. My life behind the scenes was a mess. My son had gone through being sexually assaulted in daycare at 3 years old. And I just kept putting the face on and making it work. And then I came to a collapsing point that also was simultaneously a cracking open and an awakening point. So I'm going to say that the people I work with can be one or the other. They can be the tangential or they can be the sudden awakening. Either way, it is the work to say yes to the calling. And it is the work to get rid of and shed and strip away everything that is dragging on you and keeping you from fully and completely, wholeheartedly and courageously committing to that calling, owning it and thriving in it and making your greatest contribution that you came here to give.
Mm-hmm. And of your own awakening and journey, how long was that process for you? And what were you thinking in terms of your own calling throughout your life? And then ultimately, once you had the awakening?
Yeah, I didn't think anything about callings, Arlene. I was just like, are we going to have, are we getting the units done in time so that the people can get delivered into the units, and making sure that all the widgets were in the right place and the numbers were in the right boxes and the kid was fed and the mortgage was paid and, all of those, all the things. I had zero connection to any kind of calling until I actually had my son. He absolutely was what I will call an initiator, because I then started to feel that deep sense of dissatisfaction and wondering, is this it? Is this all there is? And that's when I started to become a little bit like, that was when it was like the crack of dawn. That was like the crack of dawn, right? Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until probably 4 years later. So 4 years later, after the cosmic 2x4. Now, in my case, the cosmic 2x4 was my kid got sexually assaulted in daycare. That's a pretty big fucking cosmic 2x4.
No kidding.
Right? And I had to look at my life and say, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? And I had to stop. I just had to stop everything that was not just simply not functional anymore. And in that whole time frame, I was also simultaneously starting. So I want to really be clear about that, because it was probably for me a 4 or 5 year period of time where I had my child. I started to get awake to spirituality and to other ways of thinking and different levels of consciousness, because after I had him, I didn't have much time to read. So what I was reading business books and I was reading spiritual books. Like that was it, right? Mm-hmm. And I wasn't reading, romance novels or anything like that. I had to be very mindful about my time. And so a friend gave me a spiritual book, and that started to crack things open, and allowed me, when the big crack happened, I already had started down a path where I could see that there was support for growing me in a new way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. And well, obviously the experience that your son had and your discovery of this, it's earth shattering to both the person this happens to and the person responsible for them. And what were you thinking at that time, if you're willing to share with me, and what were you feeling at that time when this happened in relation to where you were at in your life and what your next move was going to be? Because certainly there are a lot of emotions associated with an event like this. Can you talk with me a little bit about that?
Sure. So, let me take us back in time. That was in 1999, January 1st, basically 1999. He told us he was 3 years old, and he had been sexually assaulted at daycare the week before, and it was very, very not pretty. Lots of details. He was very articulate child, 3 years old. He was incredibly articulate and was able to express. Thank God, because if he hadn't been able to express what had happened, we would not have known what was all of a sudden turning this amazing, beautiful, radiant, gorgeous child into a beast, because he got pretty, there was an impact for sure. So what ended up happening was, my first response was, I want to make sure that we take care of him immediately. Like, the first thing was get him out of that daycare, get him into some psychotherapy. He went to a play therapist who was magical and magnificent. Get the legal situation going, which my husband, my former husband, his dad, I have two husbands. They was my husband. Anyway, his dad was handling the legal stuff, and I was handling the psychological, mental health stuff. And shortly after, my husband collapsed from the whole thing. Like, he ended up leaving his job because he couldn't handle it. And frankly, I think it probably triggered in him. He may have been sexually assaulted when he was a child. I can't tell you for sure right now, but the way that he responded was he collapsed. So now I had the full responsibility of everybody's mental health, plus the financial responsibility of making sure everything was functional. Plus, I was also, at the same time, literally had just been elected the national chairperson of my trade association, and I'm in this project. It was crazy. It was crazy as fuck, Arlene. It was crazy as fuck. And I just kept it all together. And I kept focusing on the child first, the husband second. And it wasn't until months later, when I felt like my child was functional again, and my husband was, I don't know, he was less of a concern of mine at that point. Months later, that I finally hit the wall, and I was just like, oh my God, I need to get a grip on what just happened here myself. And
well, of course, because you were traumatized in that moment as well as his mother.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure. And
totally.
How long did that period last for you once you actually could exhale, and then you discover that you're suffering the effects of trauma as well in this moment? How long did the process last for you to, either be able to come to terms with that trauma, make peace with it, integrate it, before you found yourself feeling semi-normal again? And then what was your next move?
Okay, so here's what happened. For me, it led to my spiritual awakening. And I began a yoga practice. I then had a literal spiritual awakening experience where I was lying on the ground in the park with my yoga yoga teacher. She was doing a Sunday afternoon yoga class in the park. I'm under a tree, and all of a sudden my third eye burst open, and I could see angelic forms coming out of the sky and this beautiful golden stare. I mean, I had this like crazy spiritual awakening that was so vastly removed from my reality at the time, but it was undeniable. Like I couldn't deny what was happening to me. And so as a result of that spiritual awakening, I ended up leaving behind the real estate industry. I ended up divorcing my husband. I ended up going on a spiritual path and getting involved in shamanic medicine healing and sound healing and working with crystals and body work and all these things. And that whole journey was both informative for me in terms of giving me a new direction, and also was incredibly healing for me. But to answer the question directly of how long it took me, I had a shamanic healing from a colleague of mine almost 10 years after this had occurred. Let's see, it was probably not 2008 timeframe, 2009 timeframe. And she said to me, my son was fine at that point. She said to me, you took on this trauma, and literally for years, almost 10 years. It wasn't all the time, but it was kind of low level. It would come back on me. And for me, what happened, Arlene, was I carried not only the trauma, but what I carried was guilt.
Of course.
And even though there was really nothing that I could have done or could have changed to make this different, I carried that energy of guilt within me for years, and knew I was carrying the guilt and kept peeling away layer after, literally it's like layer after layer after layer after layer after layer. So I would say before I finally came to the point where I felt really clear, Arlene, I'm going to have to tell you, it's probably just in the last few months, if you want to know the truth, that I finally feel completely complete with that journey that started back in 1999.
Right. And that doesn't surprise me in the least, because people live with trauma for lifetimes. And the effect of the trauma, whether something has been done to you or you are witness to something, or you are, by association being affected, as was the case with the situation involving your son, people really don't have an understanding or appreciation of the extent to which trauma lives within us for decades. They just don't have an idea, because, people are so high functioning out there that you never actually know what is going on for them. And so it doesn't surprise me in the least that your journey has taken this long, and that, up until just a few months ago, this has been a journey for you. And what I'm curious about is, you've been working with Men on Purpose. That's the title of it, Men on Purpose, for quite some time now. And how are you managing your own journey with the trauma that you had experienced while doing what you've been doing with your clients?
Sure. Well, for most of the last decade, I actually was working with women primarily, and a few very wise men. And it's only been in the last couple of years that the shift has happened where I've now been called, and I answer the calling. So the one thing I will say, Arlene, is I am absolutely fully embodied as a model of someone who, no matter what is going on, no matter whether it looks illogical or counterintuitive or whatever, I will answer the calling, because it has been in repeatedly answering the calling that I have been able to heal, and I have been able to empower myself, and I have been able to serve as a leader and as a model and as a mentor and a facilitator for people who are also, in that state of being called. So number one, I answer the calling. And then in terms of serving the people that I've been working with, I think the most valuable thing I can say about that is that every single client that I have ever served, I have been served by them as well, because we all hold a piece of the hologram for each other. Mm-hmm. And when I first had my spiritual awakening, I started working with crystals, and I was making jewelry. And I can literally look back on the jewelry that I made back in 2001 and 2 and that time frame, and I can see, oh, I was working with this aspect of my healing by working with those stones. Well, I have evolved since then, and now it's when I'm working with clients, they have held a piece for me just as I have held a piece for them. Mm-hmm. And I love the reminder, even though I'm not a Bible fanatic by any stretch of the imagination, I love the reminder of wherever two or more are gathered, there is love. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we need each other, Arlene. Mm-hmm. We need to have the reflection of the other and to be in that sacred dialogue with each other. You may come to me for help, and you may need to invest in yourself in order to get the kind of help that I can offer you, but you are equally serving me. Mm-hmm. I am being served financially, but I'm also being served in every other way. As we come together, there is love, and love heals all of it. So
And the operative word you might think is love, but it actually is healing, because it seems that in the work, as you're describing the kind of healing that comes to you through the work that you do with other people, that the journey that your clients are on at this point in their lives and the searching for the clarity around their calling, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my instincts tell me that there is a way that they have been going through life suffering in a cosmic sort of way, and that bringing them the clarity that you do or help them arrive at actually starts a healing process for them, because they've spent a lifetime moving away from themselves and their real and true calling. And now, as you said earlier, they come back to the place where they were meant to be. Would you say that's fair?
I would say that's fair. And I would actually prefer to use the word holing. WHOLIN.
I love that. I totally love that.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful, because that is, in effect, what is happening to the person. They are truly becoming whole.
Exactly. And I am holding space and lending my vision and my insight and my awareness and my consciousness and my heart to the holing of who they already are. They've always been whole. Mm-hmm. They've always been whole. They came in whole, and this illusion has been created around them and within them that they are needing to be separated or needing to be fragmented in some way. That the work is really to support them in the holing, so that by the time we are complete, they are wholehearted, and they are wholly invested, and they are wholly committed, and they are wholly clear, and they are wholly courageously advancing the plan in service to making their greatest contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Oh my goodness.
I know, it's almost like an orgasm, Arlene. By the time you get done talking,
exhale.
About it, yes, that was so good.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be all serious. Let me be really clear.
Yeah, I'm sure.
One of the things I do is I support these men, especially the men, because men have been culturally conditioned to believe they have to have their shit together. Yeah. Like they have to have everything under control. And the work that I support them with in getting to their wholeness, I help them with all kinds of fun things. We dance, we make art, we might do chocolate pudding finger painting. it's just this wide range of ways to unlock the emotional reservoirs safely. Because a lot of times, especially men, have repressed, suppressed, and depressed.
Yeah.
And they, the heart attack is the leading cause of death, although now suicide is right up there at the top. For men over the age of 40, heart attack and suicide are like the leading causes of death for men. And the reason why is because all of their heart's yearning, their calling is bottled up, locked up, and emotionally repressed, suppressed, and depressed. So it's important, it's vital to have safe and intentionally created containers within which to open up the like pressure relief valve there.
For sure.
Right? Because it can be an explosive experience for somebody if they get hit by the cosmic 2x4. But if you can step into this work when you're getting that underlying, like, oh, something's not quite right here with my life, even though it really looks good, I'm not feeling it. When you're in that space, that's the signal. Like, listen early rather than later, because when you listen early, you can do what I call you can engage in what I call the 7 C's for creating conscious change. And that's, part of what I work with them through is helping them to get, number 1, clarity, which is knowing exactly what their calling is and what they want to do in response to that calling. Number 2, courage, having the heart to go after it. Number 3, getting the coaching and the mentorship and the guidance and the facilitation to be able to do what it is that you're called to do. Answer the calling, right? Number 4, creating whatever that what's next is. Your show is all about the next move and the what's next. Well, you can't even get to the what's next if you're still enmeshed in the, oh my God, this is a shit mess, right? You have to start to dismantle some of the stuff that's not functioning before you can really begin to put some momentum under the what's next. Now, I'm not saying you can't spin one plate and be building the bridge to spinning the next plate at the same time. You can absolutely do that, but it's very, very wise to have a container within which to do that. Right. And then the 5th, 6th, and 7th steps for creating conscious change are checking in, which is assessing and adjusting and allowing yourself to align, because sometimes you step in a direction and you're like, oh, maybe that's not exactly the right fit 100%. And you have to step back a little bit. You have to check in, and then choosing, like really giving yourself permission to have it. Like, I can actually have this. I don't have to wait. Like, a lot of men especially put it off. Well, I'll just put it off until I retire, or I'll just put it off until the kids are in college, or I'll just put it off. You don't have to put it off. You can choose to allow yourself permission to reach your dreams now, because putting it off, all that's doing is it's suppressing all that energy and creating dis-ease within you. And then finally, the final C of creating conscious change is celebrating. Like, really enjoying what manifests from your choices to say yes to your calling and committing to it.
Oh my God, this is so magnificent, because, my biggest takeaway from this conversation, Emerald, is that there is so much hope in what you're doing here and the work that you're doing with people, that as they look forward in their life, they are looking forward to a place of hope that feeds them in a really deep and meaningful way. And there's so much optimism in it. And what I love about it is that, yes, you get into the tough stuff and the stripping away, but what is revealed at the end of it is the essence of who we are and what we're meant to be doing in this lifetime. And what could be more magnificent than that?
Exactly. That's what I call my men on purpose who come onto my show. I say, you are magnificent men. Because truly they are. They're magnificent men. And I choose to see the magnificence. And just to give you one little more additional piece of my own personal story and how I ended up in my present what's next, which is working with men, is because I came to the understanding a couple of years ago, after an entire lifetime of being in relationship with men where I was either abused or they were in addiction or I felt alienated from them. And that includes my father, who was an abusive alcoholic, early boyfriend who put a gun in my face, who was a police officer, my two husbands, one of whom was a closet gambling addict and also a repressed alcoholic, and my second husband who was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and up to my own son, who ended up having a heroin addiction problem while I was in my whole journey of coming online and serving people all over the world and speaking on all those stages and so forth, and who ended up 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago this past weekend, he had me on the couch with on top of me and was saying he was going to cut me up in little pieces and throw me in the river. So I had this entire lifetime of experiences with men that were really just horrific, including bosses who were sexually, doing the Me Too thing to me too. And I became clear that I was the single unifying thread in all of that. And it was my job, if I wanted to have a different reality, to go through my own steps, my own 7 C's for creating conscious change. And what I want now, Arlene, is I want to see the magnificence in men, and I want to spotlight that, and I want to celebrate that, and I want to have more of that in my own life. So doing the Men on Purpose podcast for me has been an incredibly healing journey as well.
Absolutely. And talk about claiming your power. I mean, to go through all of those things in your life, and they were all in relation to and in relationship with men, to then say, I will not allow this to rob me of who I am and of what my calling is, and to put yourself right in there and say, this is what I must do. This is where I can create the greatest results in life. This is how I can hear and heed my calling, where you are dealing with, at least at a very, at a body memory level, the very people who would be considered the perpetrators in your life. And the ultimate act of power is to take it back and face it head on. And what an incredible way that you have taken all of that experience and turned it into something that is so productive, meaningful, helpful, and loving. It's really extraordinary, Emerald. I'm just sitting here shaking my head and thinking, wow, at the end of the day, this is what you did with all of that. And that is truly magnificent.
Thank you, Arlene. And I will say that I have had a lot of body work too.
Yes, of course you would have to, because there's no way around it.
Body work is essential. I go see my body alchemist on a regular basis. I love her.
Yeah, you have to. And what most people don't realize about trauma, and all of the experiences that you've shared here today are traumatic, and the body remembers every single one of them. The body, you may have forgotten them, but when you get triggered by something, you don't think that that's your body saying something to you. Come on. That is the reality of what's going on there in that moment. Emerald, I wanted to ask you, as we're coming to a close, and I can't even believe how quick this time has gone. I hate that. Is there anything in the past, now 20 years that has actually surprised you?
Yes. What surprised me is that the world is magical.
Beautiful.
And it's filled with wonder and beauty and amazing synchronicity. And it's all right there. It's all right there. And it is so available to us when we choose to walk in wonder and delight. Yeah.
Oh my God, how wonderful is that? And what's interesting is when I just asked you that question, and I don't think I've actually ever asked that question of anyone I've interviewed, it just seemed to be the thing to ask. Is when I was asking you, has anything surprised you? I was just about to say in a way that delighted you, but I didn't. And look at what your answer was. That's magic right there.
Totally. And it's been magic to have this time with you, Arlene, and to really spend more quality time with you, because I think you are phenomenally wonderful. And I know that you are a manifestation in my own life of magic, because we came together in a magical way. And as you said at the beginning, FFL, Friends for Life, it's going to be one of those kind of things, because we've definitely been on this path together in some other parallel reality for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I feel exactly the same way, Emerald. And I'm looking forward to a very long life with you as my friend. As we wrap this up, a lot of the people who listen to my show are at different stages in their life, and they could be struggling with the possibility of a divorce, the loss of a job, the usual struggles that every entrepreneur has in running their business and growing it, and just the kind of frustration and desperation that can result from these really challenging experiences. Excuse me. And I wonder if, you have any final thoughts that you might share with our listeners about when you're in those moments. What do you really need to be thinking about and focusing on that can enable you to get to a point where you can decide what your next move is?
Yeah. So what I'd love to do, Arlene, if it's okay with you, is I actually have a thing on my website.
Oh, of course.
And it's, you can go to emeraldgreenforest.com/gift, GIFT. If you decide you want to opt in, great. You don't have to, because it's right there for you. It's freely available, and it is my instant clarity exercise. So what they want to be focusing on, Arlene, is coming to clarity as quickly as possible and being able to make a decision as quickly as possible, so that they don't stay stuck in the clouds of confusion for very long. Right. And I think a lot of times what people do is they get stuck in the clouds of confusion, and it's literally like being whirled around in a tornado for days and days and months and months and weeks and years and years. And so the ideal is to drop out of the clouds of confusion as quickly as possible and get clarity, so that you can make decisions and move forward with your next move. It's about being in motion in a way that is productive, not in a way that's just spinning around and, oh, look, I'm in motion, but nothing's really happening.
Right, exactly. That is such great advice. And I was actually going to end our conversation today by asking how people could reach you. So thank you for going ahead and sharing that. And I think a lot of people are going to take advantage of the opportunity to understand more about their own clarity and what they need to do to be able to, make their next move. So just in summary, for our listeners who are interested in reaching out to you or finding out more about you, can you tell them where they can find you across all platforms?
Sure. So you want to go to emeraldgreenforest.com. That's my main site. If you do /gift, GIFT, you'll get the instant clarity exercise right there. It's a download. It's 8.5 minutes. So it's not going to take a lot of your time to get you to instant clarity for a specific issue that you might be navigating. You can also find me at menonpurposepodcast.com. That will take you right to my podcasting page, and it will give you access to all the episodes that we've put out so far. Plus, you can find me on Facebook at Emerald Greenforest. You can find me on Instagram at Emerald P Greenforest. You can find me on Twitter at A Wildfire. That's AWYLDFYRE. And you can find me on LinkedIn at, I think it's Emerald P Greenforest as well. If you can't find me on Emerald Greenforest, put a P in the middle, which stands for peaceful.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for that. And Emerald, this has just been so delightful. I always end with a million more questions in my head, but this has been really delightful and so meaningful in terms of how people can be thinking about where they're at in their life right now and what their calling is and what they need to be doing about that. So thank you again so very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Arlene. It's been my distinct pleasure to be on the show. And thank you to the listeners for staying with us. And my prayer is that you got something of value out of what we shared today.
Beautiful. Thank you. And as always, I wrap up every episode asking you to think about where you are in your life today and what's your next move. I'm Arlene Battisil, and I'll be back with another episode. Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battisil, and I want to know, what's your next move?